Hello, and welcome to Faith, Friends, and Leadership. Today, we're joined by my friend Kendra Harris for a powerful conversation about the unexpected connection between rest and character. Kendra shares openly about how difficult seasons in her life become pivotal moments for growth and how she learned to build and maintain her character in the face of adversity. This is a must listen for any leader who wants to understand how to lead with integrity, even when things get tough. Kendra, welcome to the show and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Zach. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Kendra. I am an Arizona native and a single mom of an amazing 7-year-old boy, who we will sure, talk about in this episode. And I've been in real estate as a licensed real estate agent for a little over 10 years, primarily doing the operations side. Recently moving over into working with the buyers and sellers directly. And then I also am a serial entrepreneur. So constantly thinking of ideas, of business ideas, how I can help support others who are coming up with businesses. And just in general, love business and growth and leadership and all of those things. So
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, we have so many cool ideas. We're not
thank
going to
you.
dive into any of those today, but I'm excited for the future and what may come to the table from your ideas and what you've thought of. I think it can make an impact in the market. So I'm excited.
Yeah,
Excited for
thank
what
you.
future Kendra gets up to.
Awesome.
You, during our conversation of what we talked about, uh, a big part of your leadership formation and in your faith formation and how that worked together was coming out of a situation that we see all too often, right? A messy divorce, and that led a couple years later, but also a separation from a business, making a decision to separate with a business partner. And these pivotal moments are all part of the formula that makes up the character of a person, right? They all add to it, influence, shift, tilt, however you want to portray that or say it. It makes a difference. And so I just wanted to ask you, and for our audience, for you to elaborate maybe on how you intentionally allowed God to use those painful experiences to grow and shape your character rather than allowing them to cause you to wallow. Right, because I've
Yeah.
known you and you're not one to wallow, serial entrepreneur like we talked about. So could you just dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those were definitely two of the hardest times of my life. Neither of them were expected exactly. And both of them felt very personal and very painful. But I honestly didn't have the luxury to wallow because here I am, a single mom, and I have, this beautiful little child to take care of who needs me. So, I think everybody has that temptation to wallow a bit, or say, why did this happen? Or why did this happen to me? Um, and those are natural questions, but those questions also have to turn into, what are you trying to show me through this, Lord? Or what is there about myself that I can learn in this? Or what am I doing that I need to leave behind because it's no longer serving me and the people around me? And what do I need to take on in order to push through this moment and to thrive in it? So, for me, I think not wanting those situations to take root of bitterness in my heart, which obviously the Bible speaks to, is not great. And also, when you become bitter, it hurts the person who's carrying the bitterness more than it ever hurts the person that, the anger or the bitterness is against. And so I just knew for my own self, my own health, that I needed to use that as an opportunity to grow, to learn about myself and to let my character grow so that I could move on and become an even better version of myself, that I could serve people better, that I could love people better, by letting that change my character. So when you ask those kinds of questions, it does shift your grief, which is very real in the moment. I certainly had grief. I had, moments where there were lots of tears and but when you do that, it shifts it from the grief to the growth. So one Bible verse that I absolutely love is Romans 5:3-4, which says, not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings because we know suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. And that is a really hard verse and also a really great verse because it gives meaning to those sufferings if you let it. Those sufferings can either hold you back, or if you allow that process that God designed to turn you into somebody who can persevere, who is more resilient, that then becomes you become a pretty great person because it builds that character in you, right? And then that character, when you have great character and you have a firm foundation in the Lord, then you have hope no matter what, circumstance and season that you're going through. So that for me became very much like refining, again, leaving behind the things like people pleasing, old patterns, wrong ways that I thought, and then instead in its place finding clarity and humility and resilience. And so now when I encounter people who've gone through those similar situations or are going through something difficult, my empathy is really strong, in that. And I can then meet them where they're at and help encourage them because I've actually gone through the difficult things.
Yeah, you've been in it in a shared experience, as at least as far as the general circumstances, right? But everyone experiences things differently when they get through it. But
Of
yeah,
course.
it's you hear the stories, you hear the testimonies, you read the scripture, and oftentimes those things become anchors that hold us back because they're just difficult. Right, and that's what we talked about is that there's just no way around it. The
Right.
grief, the struggle, the challenge, you just have to go through it, and no one can really fix the problem. You
Right.
pray through it, and the Lord will help form you through it and get you through it, but it's hard. It's hard to go through.
And I think in your youth, or if you're, fortunate enough to go to have, relatively easy moments of your life, which I had to that point, then I would buck at any suffering and be like, no, I'm not, run away from it. Like, I don't want that. What do I have to do to make it go away? And now I've seen so often how faithful God has been in those moments and who he's turned me into, now compared to who I was in my youth, that when something happens, it's much quicker for me to go, okay, I don't like the circumstance, but what is there to learn, in this moment? Because I know that God will use it for my good.
Absolutely. And in that, right, there's the grieving process, working through it, like you said, being reminded of who God is, what he's brought you through and led. And we know as you transition or you're in those valleys and we're heading towards the mountain, now there is different lessons and different things we go. And you and I talked about highlighting the importance of learning lessons from the past. We discussed that, but how those experiences, you got to make sure you're not self sabotaging your new relationships or opportunities with those. So there's a distinct line, I guess, if you will, between learning the lessons and then making the lessons wrote in stone that where you're applying them to everything, right? And some situations may not be the same. So, what is the key to renewing your mind and approaching that you use when it comes to a new chapter with wisdom? And how do you do that where you don't carry too much baggage from the previous situation you went through?
Yeah, that's a great question because those things are hard and they do shape you, right? And you can wear sometimes your baggage like a proud little jewel, but that doesn't really serve you either. So, for me, I think it starts with surrender and intentionality before the Lord and letting God shape your future self, your future thoughts, your future path, instead of repeating and rehearsing to yourself those old narratives that maybe you were saying in the past or have become a part of you. So, for example, I had to replace a lot of lies that I was told. That I adopted as my own personal beliefs, that I wasn't enough to do something. I didn't have the skill set. I belonged in a certain place or position because I wasn't good at something, or I can't do it alone. I need the help. And so it takes reminding myself of what the truth is about how God sees me. And I was very fortunate before these circumstances to be exposed to external voices through the form of books, right? Like, I love reading books. I've read a lot of books. A lot of authors have become my mentors over the year. And one of the things that really stuck with me was that what you tell yourself, your body believes. And I remember just having this very distinct moment of saying, man, these things that I believe about myself, they didn't even originate in me. They originated in these other people's perceptions of who I was. And I've adopted that to the point where I'll now tell somebody, oh, I'm not good at that. Right. Or, no, that's not really for me. Like, I'm not very creative, which, and then I would stop and say, wait a second. I think creativity is a strength of mine. Why have I been telling myself and believing for so long that I'm not a creative person? So it takes resetting that voice in your head. And it can be very subtle. I think as a believer, you're listening for the voice of God. You have your own voices. You have the voices of people who've influenced you, right? And so it's taking that time to be still, to listen for God's voice, to search for what he says about you in his word, and to start reminding yourself of those things. So, affirmations has always been a big thing for me, that I tell myself either things that are true about myself that I haven't believed up to this point, things that God has told me is true, or things that I want to be true. And if I tell myself them enough, then I will believe them, right? And you can become the person that you want to be just by telling yourself that you are, and eventually you believe it and you start walking in that way of that kind of person that you want to be. So setting boundaries is super important. Again, voices really impact you, so letting certain voices in, not letting other voices in is pretty important. And letting those relationships that I have in my life be ones that speak life into me. And we know what those are. You know who those people are when you spend time with them. And then there's other people that you're like, oh, I feel so drained, right? And so setting those boundaries and making sure that the voices you're listening to are ones that are life giving.
Yeah, and I would add and we have an enemy that's trying to cause doubt, right? So we
Absolutely.
have and they're being influenced with all so that you have the other people's voices who are also being influenced by the enemy's circumstances, everything that they have going on. We're believing
Yes.
it, and we're being influenced while trying to listen to the Father and what's true and what God's saying.
Yeah, it's a lot of noise. And so I
Yep.
think finding those ways to silence the noise so that you can hear clearly the voice of God is super super important. And yeah, just know, I think knowing to, when you don't make yourself a victim, right? Those things happen to me, yes. I have parts that I played that allowed those things to happen to me. Um I did things that put myself in those circumstances. I'm in control of my responses to those things. And so for me, not looking at myself as a victim was another really helpful way to keep things in the past, the baggage in the past, and moving forward. Okay, what new decisions can I make? Again, what kind of person am I going to operate as moving forward so that those same patterns don't repeat themselves?
Yeah, and one of the things that you added in, you and I talked about, as part of that new character, the new circumstances that you were in and who you wanted to be, is adding rest into your rhythms of life, right? Because of some of these circumstances and things, maybe for some of us, when a major event like that happens, it shapes us. And a lot of times we want to grab the wheel and we just think like, okay, I'm just going to outwork it, right? Or I'm going to outrun it. I'm going to do it. And you had said that a lot of your healing came from the actual rest in the Lord and what he had put on your heart to take that rest as a leader, and that really helped you along that journey. So in the
Yeah.
context of society, we know it's often under prioritized, even though, people have flashy vacations and things they do, but we know it's unprioritized. So in a world that values this constant work and productivity, what does intentional rest look like for you now? And what would you recommend leaders to maybe do and to partake when it comes to rest?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, certainly I had moments where I also was like, okay, we're just going to do this, right? Like I've got my goals, I've got these things that I'm going to accomplish, and I'm just to distract myself, going to throw myself headfirst into what can I do? And I had some health issues that forced me to slow down a little bit. And at the same time, I'm looking around. So when I came out of that business partnership, there was very much an environment of I call it hustle culture, um, that I was in, and I was so burnt out. I remember the month after that partnership ended, people telling me, "Wow, you look so happy." And I had to pick up, very quickly. I mean, God worked in very amazing, mysterious ways. And I unintentionally connected with a friend who had a delivery route. And so for the month of December, right, but leading up to Christmas, and I was like, I need to make some money and pay my bills. I was delivering packages, and I loved it. I loved that I didn't have to think, that there was a quick system I followed, and people were happy to see me because I was delivering their Christmas presents, to them for their kids. And people would just say, you look so happy. And I was like, I didn't even realize how burnt out I was in this culture that I was in until I was out of it. And it made me stop and kind of evaluate. And I had another friend who similarly was evaluating it too. So we got to talk with each other quite a bit about it. But this idea that rest is laziness is toxic, honestly, because rest is necessary for your well-being and your health. And if you are saying yes to everything, or you're wholeheartedly saying yes to only certain types of things, then you're saying no to things that you should be showing up at, right? And so for me, being able to set aside that time to say yes and show up, fully present for the people in my life, and honestly for myself, was really important. Um, for me, that looked like having unhurried time with my son, or and then that, I mean, that impacted our relationship a ton because he would be interrupting me. I would be in the middle of I was always in the middle of something. And I would, impatiently be like, not right now, later. And then here we are at bedtime. And okay, you get 20 minutes of my time for bed. And I saw that it was hurting our relationship. And so taking that time to like put my phone away, right? And giving him significant amounts of my time was really important to us and really helped our relationship a lot. Um and then working on myself, my whole wellness, my whole health. And so I think when it comes to that productivity, that hustle culture, it's like the end goal is what you said, those nice vacations, right? Like that people are having the what seems like endless amounts of money. And I read this amazing book called Never Enough, and there will never be enough money. When you have it, you want more, right? And I think um looking at what does wealth mean, not just financially, but what does wealth in my home look like? What does wealth in relationships look like? What does wealth in my personal health look like? And there were so many boxes that um even though verbally maybe we're given like, oh yeah, those are important, you need to do them. In action, they were not a priority for me, or really for a lot of the people that were around me. So making time for exercise and different wellness activities that were really helpful to get my body to slow down and out of flight or fight mode, which I've been in for so long. And allowing that healing to happen physically, emotionally, spiritually, spending time in prayer with the Lord. There was just I was getting a lot done, but there was a lot of healing that needed to happen.
Love that so much. It's such wisdom in that. Absolutely agree. Laziness is often overused to describe rest and healing that we're called to do in the Lord and when we find it. I was reminded, I was looking up Proverbs, and it's Proverbs 6, but it's 9 through 11, right? How long will you lie there, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep, little slumber, little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man. And when you look at that and what the Hebrew word translated sluggard, and you look at its meaning, its core meaning is sluggish or lazy, but its root word means to be indolent or slack or to delay. And the word doesn't describe a person who's tired after a long day of work. It describes someone who is habitually inactive. This is a person whose laziness is a defining characteristic of their life. So the way
Mm,
you define words between rest and laziness is huge because, as you
absolutely.
described, right? We hear that word poverty in the Proverbs and we instantly go to wealth. And it is talking about wealth to an extent. However, poverty can come in the form of relationships, particularly
Mhm.
with God. It can become poverty can become in your relationships with a spouse, with friends, all types of situations to where we would say, what is your true wealth and are you poor in it? Right. So you can be in the midst of busyness, still be a sluggard when it comes to your responsibility at home or being a mom, right? Being a dad. You can be a sluggard in that. And you can be a sluggard with your relationship with Christ too if you're not focused on the right things. Oftentimes in our world, we talk about, are you being um, busy or productive? Right?
Mm.
Because there's a difference there between busy and productive, and rest is no different. Are you resting in the right and appropriate ways and being present? Um, or are we just moving around to be moving and now you're being a sluggard in other areas of your life?
Yeah, and isn't that paradigm shifting? You could be a sluggard when you're incredibly busy. I love that, right? Because that's one of those things and one of those moments that stops makes you stop and pause and think, which I think we would, all benefit from doing even more of, right? And so I think too, when we look at that through a lens of a leader, you're leading other people. A very common phrase in leadership is leaders set the tone. And I've always heard that through the context of like, I need to be working the hardest. I cannot expect the people that I'm leading to do things that I would be unwilling to do myself. And yes, that's part of it, but it goes to those other areas like you were talking about. If I'm not resting, then why would my people rest, right? Or why would the people that I'm leading rest if I am not giving those things priority or I'm feeling guilt over them, which I think is a big part of that culture is like you start feeling guilty if you're not doing, right? You feel guilty if you're sitting on the couch cross stitching or watching Netflix or whatever it is that you do, right? Or even just laying in bed for however long scrolling on Instagram and catching up on the people in your life and what they've been up to. You have that guilt like, oh, there's so many other things on my to-do list that I should be getting to. And so if that's what you're applying to yourself, then the people you're leading are either directly or indirectly going to feel that pressure too. So it's a snowball effect and you're creating this culture of if you are not doing something, then you're doing it wrong. And that's, just it's not healthy. It's not healthy physically. It's not in all those areas, right? And that's where you get just so much burnout. And I think, like you said, a lot of broken relationships because it's difficult to have healthy relationships. It's difficult to spend the intentional time analyzing what's happening around you if you're so constantly distracted by the things that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I mean that's part of why even in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talks about keep your eyes on heaven, right? On the treasures in heaven and not on earth.
Yeah.
Because I think people hear us talk about that and they're like, well, I look around and all the successful people are in that hustle culture, if you will, right? And I think I would look at it and go, yes, you're right. It does produce a result. The question is that the result you want? Because that's going to end on earth.
And like you said, like the definition of success, what is your definition of success? And if it's having a lot of money and going on nice vacations, but having broken relationships, because I mean, let's face it, a lot of stuff we see is on social media and you have no idea what is happening
Yeah, there's no
behind.
context of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I can tell you from experience, there were things that looked really great on the outside, and what people weren't seeing were terrible and damaging. And so, what does success look like to you? And for me, success is not. I remember specifically thinking. Success is not becoming a billionaire. And for so long, that was a message of like, dude, if you're not shooting for this, then like you're selling yourself short, right? And I remember thinking like I actually I don't ever want to be a billionaire. To me that would not be success. For me success looks a lot more like how am I present in the daily moment, because I can hyperfixate on past or future. And so what is this moment that I am in, am I enjoying it, am I finding joy, am I experiencing the fruits of the spirit, am I expressing those towards others? To me that's much more now a life of success than it is being able to go on, endless amounts of vacation.
Amen. So what's next?
Oh, what's next? Well, I do have some of those ideas in my head. Yeah, I think for me, have a couple different like ideas, but trying to gather those all into like a single passion and how do they work together and how can I move forward in a way where my career is just really I find a lot of fulfillment in that. I think narrowing in on that, which you and I talked about, right? What is your vision? And so I think I have a very clear vision in a lot of different areas of my life. But career wise, I'm still trying to figure out exactly where that vision is. I know I love to help people. So I think regardless of where I end up, really caring for people's needs and really like seeking, I love to be a person that people can be authentic with, right? Because I think there were many times in my life I felt like I couldn't be my authentic self for one reason or another. And life is messy, and Jesus meets us in our messiness. And so I want to be the friend that meets people in their messiness too. So, yeah, figuring out that passion of how I can help people coming from a very authentic and genuine place. Yeah, we'll see how it all falls together. But
I'm excited. Well, thank
yeah,
you so
thank you.
much for sharing and letting us just hear a little bit about your journey, your insights, and your wisdom is much appreciated. And for our listeners, till next time, keep living a life of faith, building up your friends, and embracing the journey. God bless.